Hello and welcome to the first Cigar Box Guitar Origins video from Coda Tuition. So here we are looking at some of the most influential artists of the 20th century who started learning on cigar box guitars or some form of homemade instrument. And this very first one is looking at the life and music of blind Willie Johnson. So we're going to be looking a little bit into his backstory, a little bit into his life, but also we're going to be playing some of the tracks that he's renowned for, having to listen to them and trying to figure out his approach to playing guitar, and also discussing his vocals a little bit because he was a renowned singer as well. And also hopefully there'll be a couple of these tracks that we'll be able to rework into cigar box guitar arrangements. I'm personally a little bit incapacitated at the minute, but I'm hoping in a few weeks there'll be some quite nice slide tunes that we can get from this video. So without further ado, on with the life and music of blind Willie Johnson. Johnson was a gospel blues singer and guitarist, and he was born in Pendleton, Texas in 1897. As a performer, he was renowned for haunting religious blues songs, which he performed with a very powerful voice, and he played guitar accompaniment, and this was usually slide guitar that he played alongside his singing. Johnson's parents were sharecroppers who, as you'd expect, didn't have money for luxuries, so he was given his first homemade cigar box guitar at the age of 5 to start playing on. Unfortunately, he was blinded a couple of years later, apparently during an argument between his father and stepmother, and he remained in this condition for the rest of his life. Johnson was heavily influenced by his church attendance as a youth, and he wanted to become a minister. And when he progressed onto playing regular 6-string guitar, he performed religious songs and often busked on street corners in local Texas towns such as Hearn. He was also regularly playing in church, and by the late 20s he'd become a locally renowned performer. During 1927, Johnson was selected for a Dallas recording session for Columbia Records, where he cut 6 tracks, including the renowned classics It's Nobody's Fault But Mine and Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground, and we're going to be having a little look at both of these later in the video. He was paid well for the session, and his first release also sold well, with Columbia's Race Records division pressing over 15,000 copies of his first single, which was quite impressive even compared with some of the established blues artists of the time. So the first track we're going to have a listen to is called Jesus Make Up My Dying Bed. This was from that first 1927 session, and it was also his first single release. And on the flip side was I Know His Blood Can Make Me Whole. The track is recorded with the guitar in open D tuning, which was apparently his favoured tuning. And you can hear the guitar parts very much split between what the thumb's playing, so the thumb's droning the lower bass strings, the D notes, without actually changing chord throughout, and then the fingers are playing riffs, and he's using a slide, and they're on the higher strings, and it's playing riffs and supporting melodies, which goes with the vocals. So let's have a listen to the track.
That man just got married, haven't been a minute apart, but to receive both in my hand and religion in my heart.
So because Johnson was a solo performer, he basically didn't need to worry about other musicians staying in sync with his songs. And so as a result, his blues cycles are quite loose. You know, they don't adhere to completely rigid numbers of bars and beats every single time. They are either stretched out or even contracted, depending on vocal phrasing and accompanying like slide riffs. But this sequence is something close to 16 bars in length. That is if you feel the whole thing in cut time. And what that means is that it's basically twice as fast as how you would normally feel the pulse. So if you're tapping along to the song like this, roughly about that speed, then you would actually count the beats twice as fast as that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and so it'd be 16 of those bars with 4 beats in each bar. And if you just rewind the video and have another quick listen to how he's playing, you might notice that there's a regular offbeat strum, which basically, again, if you're feeling it in cut time, it's on the 2 and the 4 each time. 2, 4, 2. And this particular rhythm really drives the song. It really helps the momentum of the song. And it's a very common backbeat rhythm which you get across a whole range of different styles. And also your standard drum beat, it's normally what the drummer will be playing on the snare. The snare will often be 1, 2, 4, 2. So you can check that out in different places. So the next track we're going to have a look at is called It's Nobody's Fault But Mine. This is from that same original Dallas session, and as a result the guitar is still tuned to open D. And it's the same approach where the thumb's pedaling the bass notes, but this time there's a slight little difference in that the guitar and the vocal line do imply a chord change that it sounds like roughly halfway through. The chord wants to go to an A without the bass ever actually changing. It still stays pedaling on the D. So let's have a listen to the track and see if you can hear that.
And nobody's fault but mine. Nobody's fault but mine. I don't read my soul belie. I have a Bible in my home. I have a Bible in my home. I don't read my soul belie.
So, as with the previous song, it's still quite a loose blues cycle, but I think this one's somewhere close to a 10-bar cycle compared to 16 in the previous one. But if you listen roughly about halfway through, it definitely sounds like the vocals pulling the whole sound to an A chord, which would be the 5th chord. And so, say if you had your cigar box guitar tuned to D, that would be fret 7. That would be the A. So that's kind of the second strongest sounding chord in that particular key. But he never goes there because the bass is just droning away on the low D. And as a performer on acoustic guitar without amplification, you know, back in the 1920s, he would have been a loud guitar player. You know, it would have been surprising if you were in a room with him. It would have been surprising how loudly he was playing his guitar. Yet the vocals more than compete with the volume of the guitar. You know, really, if you go back again and listen to this track, listen to how present the sound of the vocals are. You know, really, really strong voice. And the sort of very gravelly and slightly abrasive tone to his voice, alongside, you know, the slide riffs, I think combined, it gives it a really strong, sort of intense atmospheric sound. And having had a look through his backstory, I think it's safe to say he's definitely a man who lived the blues. Blind Willie Johnson completed 4 further recording sessions between 1928 and 1930 in Dallas, New Orleans and Atlanta, and he released a total of 30 tracks under his performing name, with several songs actually featuring his wife Willis Harris on vocals. Unfortunately, with the onset of the Great Depression, this killed his recording career in the 1930s, because obviously most of his audience lacked any spare cash at all, and so they definitely didn't have the income for luxury items such as buying records. Johnson never became wealthy from his music, and he stayed in Texas his whole life. By 1945, he was living in Beaumont, where unfortunately his house was destroyed by an accidental fire. With little money to his name, he had no choice but to continue to live in the house, exposed to the elements, and this unfortunately coincided with the winter months. And alongside continuing to busk in the streets to try and earn money, within a few days he contracted pneumonia. And also, without access to hospital care due to the lack of money, he unfortunately succumbed to the pneumonia and died later the same year. So we're now going to be having a listen to the track called Soul of a Man. Now this track features female vocals alongside Johnson on vocals and guitar, and these were probably provided by his wife Willis Harris. Now she doesn't sing in harmony, she actually sings in unison, which basically means that she's singing the same line as Johnson but an octave higher, which is common when you have men and women singing together. And if you have a listen to the comparable volume between the male and female vocals, it's another indication of how strong and how powerful his voice was, because he's very much present in the recording. Her voice sounds like it sort of stepped back a little bit. I mean, it could be that in early recording sessions, basically it was mono, one track, and it was basically one mic. So you mix the track by positioning people closer or further away from the mic, depending on what volume you wanted people to be at. So it's possible they might have got her to step back, so she was more of an accompaniment, but it's also very much possible that they were just standing round and he was just belting it out. So let's have a listen to the song and we'll talk about it in a minute.
Well, want somebody to tell me, answer if you can. Want somebody to tell me that what is the soul of a man? I'm going to ask the question, please answer if you can. Is there anybody sure and can tell me that what is the soul of a man? Well, I want somebody tell me. Answer if you can. I want somebody to tell me that what is the soul of a man.
So Johnson doesn't play slide on this track. You could probably hear that the guitar was playing fretted note riffs, and it was also in a different key. This one, it's actually in the key of E, and so again the thumb was droning the open E bass notes without actually changing chord, and he was playing fretted note riffs which were plucked with his fingers over the top. And as with It's Nobody's Fault But Mine, you could probably hear that the vocal line was wanting to pull the whole song into a new chord about halfway through. That would have again been what we call a fifth chord, so it would have been a B, which again, if your cigar box guitar is tuned to E, it's still fret 7, that would be a B. And so with the song being in the key of E, it definitely implies that the guitar was in E tuning. And so, as far as I'm aware, a lot of acoustic rural players favoured a particular tuning for when they were performing. And so open E tuning is actually all of the same shapes and chords and riffs and all the rest of it. You can play in exactly the same way as open D tuning. It's just the equivalent of 2 frets, or what we call 1 tone higher. So it's definitely possible that he retuned his guitar to maybe accommodate the vocal range for both of them for this track. I mean, he might have used a capo, he might have put a capo on fret 2, but I'm not entirely sure of how easy they were to come by in 1920s Texas. But like I said, I'm currently a little bit incapacitated at the minute, so I've not actually tried to play this track. So if anyone has done and you think I've got it wrong, he's not actually in open E, maybe he's in like standard 6-string tuning. So feel free, please drop me a line and correct me if you think I'm mistaken. So the last track we're going to have a look at is called Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground. Now this is from that original 1927 Dallas session, so it's still in open D tuning as the first 2 that we had a look at. It does differ from those slightly though, because it has a much looser, almost free time rhythm to it. It's slower, it doesn't have that driving pulse to it, and it's almost instrumental, or rather it's lyric free. I think this sounds like it's quite a guitar-led track, slide guitar again, and the vocals, when they come in, they're actually accompanying the slide riffs. He's sort of singing in unison almost with what he's playing on the guitar. And that kind of slower, almost free time sound really gives it quite an emotive and intense sound. And you know, you can almost sounds like he's channeling his experience into this particular performance. And it was also rumoured that he used a knife to play the slide with on this session, although his wife Willis claimed that he used a brass ring. But let's have a listen to the track and see what we think. So again, because this track is in D tuning, the thumb is just playing the low D notes, they're droning away, and the slide riffs are very subtly changing between kind of major and minor feels. So what you get in the key of D, it's the difference between playing an F sharp and an F note. So if you have an F sharp, it's what we call a major third interval, and that gives either riffs or chords a major sound, whereas the flat third, which would be the F note, gives them the minor sound. And a lot of blues does this, but on this particular slide take, he's very subtle in how he's switching between the two. You know, it gives it a really interesting character. And hopefully you could hear how the vocal was very much accompanying. When it eventually came in, it was singing along with the slide line, you know, kind of in unison. And as a little aside, I actually had a look at Paris, Texas by Ry Cooder last year, and I think there's some really strong influences in this track. That one is very free time, but also some of the very specific little licks that he puts into Paris, Texas, I think you can definitely trace them back to this recording. So maybe if you, I'll put a link to that one below, and if you compare both tracks, you might be quite interested, and you can see if you can hear any similarities. So what of the influence and legacy of blind Willie Johnson? Well, firstly, his slide playing, his style was pretty technically adept, and he was definitely influential on contemporary and subsequent blues players of generations after him, including, and not least, Howlin' Wolf. Johnson's track John the Revelator was included on Volume 2 of the Anthology of American Folk Music. This was a compilation record which was very influential on the 1950s and 60s folk scene, including Bob Dylan. And in fact, Dylan reworked the track Jesus Make Up My Dying Bed into In My Time of Dying, which was released on his 1962 debut album. Other notable covers of his songs have been recorded by Led Zeppelin and Eric Clapton, and there was also a 2016 album of covers which was released and featured, among others, Tom Waits, Sinead O'Connor and Derek Trucks. However, perhaps most significantly, his song Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground was included in the 27-song catalogue for the 1977 Voyager space probe, and this was aimed at showcasing human culture and experience for any sentient beings who might happen across it, which I think, to be honest, is a pretty impressive contribution for someone who came from such humble origins, and even one who learnt to play on a cigar box guitar. So that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about the life and also listening to the music of blind Willie Johnson. And if you want to check out any of his music or find out any more about him, there's links below to tracks on YouTube and also his biography on Wikipedia. And if you found this video interesting, please like and subscribe, and even consider dropping me a tip via the PayPal link below. Much appreciated. But most importantly, hope you like the video, and hopefully I'll be along, barring any copyright issues, with some more Cigar Box Guitar Origins videos very soon.